But I think first and foremost, thank you for everyone for joining us this morning. Congratulations to the organizers, another great event. I'm really excited to see how this has grown over the last few events and looking forward to today's agenda. So I think most of you should be familiar with CME Group and Gemini, but I think maybe just to kind of set the table, we'll give a little bit of introductions to ourselves just in case. So my name is Tim McCourt. As they said, I'm the global head of equity index products and alternative investment products at CME Group. And what that means is that I look after the equity index products such as S&P 500, NASDAQ, Dow Jones, but I also look after cryptocurrency. So CME Group got involved in cryptocurrency back in around 2015 with the introduction of the Bitcoin reference rate with our partner Crypto Facilities, and that's when we introduced the benchmark, and then we introduced cryptocurrency futures with Bitcoin in December of 2017, and we'll be introducing options on Bitcoin in January 2020 on the 13th. So this kind of just generally setting the table of why CME is here, and with that I'd like to introduce you to my co-host of the Fireside Chat, Jeanine Hightower-Sellitto from Gemini, and take it away.
Thanks, Tim. So I'm at Gemini. I'm the Managing Director of Operations, and I look after our cold storage custody business as well as the exchange business. Gemini has been around for a pretty long time for the crypto space, not as long as CME that just celebrated its 100th anniversary. But for more than 5 years, we've been building out an institutional-grade platform for our customers to buy and sell cryptocurrencies, as well as a storage platform for institutional customers, high net worth individuals, and other investors to store their crypto in our cold storage facility. Our platform is really based on the core principles in terms of security and trust. We operate as a New York State trust company for both the exchange as well as the cold storage custody solution. We focus on really robust technology for the trading platform, as well as a really distinct feature set for both custody as well as the exchange. Things like, I think most of you expect in the institutional space, like fixed connectivity, sub-accounting, the ability to run drop copy reports, sort of all the nuts and bolts of building a market, as well as some integrated solutions that are pretty unique in the crypto space because we actually allow custody customers that are in cold storage to fully operate on the exchange in real time, which is pretty unique for the crypto world today.
That's great. Now, what's interesting, Jeanine said CME just recently celebrated this 100th anniversary of our clearinghouse, but CME's been around for about 200 years. Now, what's interesting is CME started on the streets of Chicago as a place for farmers to sell butter and eggs to each other. We've come a long way since then, and I think we had the advent of financial futures with FX back in the 1970s, and now we have cryptocurrency futures, which was an asset class that didn't exist, over a decade ago. So I think what's interesting is you're kind of seeing this bridging of conventional markets into the crypto markets. I think Jeanine and I both have some similar backgrounds in how we got into crypto. So Jeanine, maybe you can just give like a little bit of the nickel tour of kind of your conventional background and how you found yourself into getting involved in crypto.
Yeah, actually I started long ago in the late 90s doing internet investment banking when internet was a sector in and of itself. And spent a couple years doing that, which led me to work for an exchange startup back in the early 2000s. And I worked for a company called the International Securities Exchange. We were in an equity derivatives market, which for those of you sort of in the trading markets back then, you might remember that all of equity derivatives at the time were traded on the floor by humans with paper tickets, and our company was a startup that brought fully electronic trading to the listed options markets on the equity derivative side. Went through a long run there, so cut my teeth in the markets and spent about 14 years there through a public offering, through an acquisition by Deutsche Börse. We were a happy subsidiary for about 10 years until they sold us to NASDAQ when they were looking to buy the LSE. And so spent a year at NASDAQ ushering our platform onto the NASDAQ platform, and then after that ended up at Gemini. And a lot of the things I did at the International Securities Exchange are pretty similar to the things I'm doing at Gemini. A lot of people ask me, like, how are things similar or different? And most of the time, running a market, running technology solutions for customers in the institutional space, there's a lot of similarities, but every now and again, there's some different nuances to this space for sure.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, so yeah, my background is an equity index trader, so I was on the sell side for about 13, 14 years before moving to the exchange, and then got involved in crypto for that and kind of always found it fascinating. But I think what's interesting is as we see these kind of parallels developing between historical conventional markets and crypto markets. I think one thing that is not necessarily the same is the customer base on your side. Where I think when we used to kind of institutional flow in the legacy conventional markets, they've been around for 100, 200 years. What are you seeing in terms of your customer mix, or how are you seeing the advent of new customers or old customers maybe adopting new approaches to dealing with crypto on your platform?
Yeah, crypto is definitely different in one way in terms of the market, in that we face off directly with retail customers, which is not something you'd ever do in a securities market. So we don't really have any intermediaries on the retail side. So that's pretty different. On the institutional side, we have a pretty diverse mix as well in terms of what I would consider pure market makers, prop trading firms. But again, also we interface with buy-side firms directly, which is really different than conventional markets and probably what you see on your side.
Yeah, I think what's interesting at CME is that we obviously have several asset classes, one of the largest kind of multi-asset exchanges on the planet. So what's been interesting for us is we've tapped into the existing network of our historic customers as well as attracting new customers for crypto. So I think that's been very interesting to see the institutional mix as well as the retail mix as well as the proprietary trading firms all coming together to help the price discovery of CME. Has been really fun to watch. But it is interesting where we've also seen this kind of shift in the market where you have people who have cut their teeth, so to speak, right, that we were saying in the conventional markets and using that skill set now to pursue crypto trading, starting crypto firms, starting crypto businesses. And I think it's really interesting to watch because I think it's not only necessarily the personal draw maybe for financial gain, right, for some folks, and it's an opportunity for them to stretch their wings, but it's really just, I think, the pull of not something like this comes along every so often. I think when we look at traditional equity markets, I think the last exciting thing was like decimalization, maybe, I don't know. So the fact that like a new asset class has emerged over the last decade, I think is a major draw for people. I think when we look at that though, what's interesting is it allows us to pay homage to our backgrounds and how do we use the skill sets that we've learned to help develop this ecosystem, to help push out this frontier in such a way that we can attract new customers, retail customers, institutional customers, because we need everyone in the market to really make it work for the long term. So I think that's what's interesting is, given my background as an index trader, I think obviously I have a bias towards indices, I have a bias towards the interrelatedness of spot markets and derivative markets and OTC markets, ETF markets. I'm really a believer in the symbiotic relationship. So that was important for us to develop the Bitcoin reference rate, of which Gemini became a member back on August 30th. So that's been great for us, but I'm curious, like, how are you kind of approaching these things from your side, and how do you see your participation in things like the Bitcoin reference rate that underlies our future, or how do you and Gemini view the interrelated or how the ecosystem's been developing?
Yeah, I think that the advent of futures and soon-to-be options in the market will do wonderful things for the crypto space because it really is an ecosystem. People don't really trade, spot solely. I mean, well, some people do, but the full ecosystem is really what helps the market grow, where people can speculate, people can trade on a fully regulated marketplace, they can participate in the spot market and help drive price discovery in all three. It's a very natural extension of any particular market. For Gemini, we really focus on building out tool sets for our customers, so trading platforms that fit their needs, as I mentioned, technology that fits their needs, as well as listing product and assets that they want to be trading. So I think there's more to come in terms of our future partnerships.
That's great. I think when you talk about regulation, I think oftentimes it gets a bad rep in the crypto space. But I think certainly from our perspective as regulated venues and owing to the regulatory importance in the ecosystem, I think what people don't necessarily understand is that it makes it easier for customers to get involved, especially when we're looking at trying to capture some of the institutional flow and bring people into this market. It's that certainty, that tried and trusted relationships that exist, the fact that you have to disclose certain things to the public, that you have to disclose rule changes, that you have to make your product specs available, and these are things that you can't change easily, I think provides certainty for customers that may have a 3 to 5 year on-ramp for approvals and technology builds, that the rules of the road will be largely the same, in a few years. So kind of what's your view? I mean, obviously Gemini, I think, is on the forefront of kind of pushing for the regulatory certainty of the markets. Where's it gone the last few years, and how do you see it developing, I guess, over the next few years from your perspective?
Yeah, in terms of the spot market, it's really changed a lot over the last couple of years. Gemini's been a big advocate for thoughtful regulation of the space. I think probably people have seen our ads in New York, a really sort of brand awareness campaign focusing on regulated markets and advocating in Washington, as well as with our regulator in the state of New York, for transparency, focus on real market integrity for the crypto space. And where I come from in terms of a securities background, I really believe that when customers have a level playing field in terms of what they expect from a marketplace, and they're not having to focus on evaluating different exchanges for their security profile or their protections against cybersecurity or threats, or frankly just fairness in the marketplace. I think most people in this room are markets professionals, and you have a standard that you would expect from CME as well as other markets in terms of market access, transparent pricing, transparent rules that exist for everyone on the marketplace. When we get to a point, that's really when these markets will start to grow and I think attract additional investors. I think as we talk about growing this marketplace, really for the crypto experience for all, it's those sort of things that give people confidence in a market, and confidence will help ultimately bring in new investors, especially from the buy side.
It's interesting when you talk about confidence, right? So I think it's one thing that's certainly something that's important to CME, because for those not familiar, the way a centrally cleared product works is that the clearinghouse actually guarantees the performance of the contract. So when you're trading that Bitcoin future at CME Group or any other future that we offer, CME, the clearinghouse, becomes the buyer to every seller and the seller to every buyer. We actually novate the trade after it's cleared, and we guarantee the performance at maturity or at expiration, that you will get paid or we will make you pay, if you're on the other side of the trade. And I think what's interesting about that is it gives that certainty that you don't have that bilateral counterparty risk that you do on some of the unregulated platforms or some of the OTC platforms. And that's certainly an attractiveness to all products, but I think certainly important for crypto, because people need confidence that they can rely on tried and trusted practices. And I think that's an interesting thing that we found from CME. I think the other thing you mentioned when we're talking about access, right? I think sometimes people underestimate the ease of access is very important to these markets. When we look at why CME pursued something like a financially settled contract, for example, versus other product designs, is one, it was designed in response to customer feedback, but it was important for us for it to plug and play with the existing global distribution that we had. So in terms of the way your brokers access it, your clearing members access it, the way you consume market data, the way you see an order book, it looks and feels like any other financial future on our system. It functions as the same type of widget, so to speak, as the S&P 500 future and the Bitcoin future. The only difference is the underlying. Our underlying for Bitcoin futures is 5 Bitcoin versus the arithmetic representation of the 500 stocks of the S&P 500. So I think that ease of access, that confidence, I think sometimes these are things that people take for granted, that I think for us, it's becoming certainly more important to attracting the institutional clients.
Yeah, and there's even things we're doing on the Gemini side to help support some of the things that you were mentioning. So things like, between the cold storage custody and the exchange account, which has an omnibus account structure for those that are trading, we've developed a clearing facility. So we don't do any OTC brokerage at Gemini. We don't offer any of those services, but we do offer a clearing portal so that customers that need a safe way to use an escrow service to make sure that there's delivery on both sides of the trade, it really helps that business for them, because they don't have to deal with all the back office hassles in terms of receiving coin as well as sending out wires, but they also have assurance that both sides will be met, which is really important for growth of this market.
Yeah, for certain. I think that's something where we've certainly seen is there's a lot of there was a lot of angst when we were kind of designing the future product of people didn't necessarily want to, how do I open a wallet? How do I solve a custody solution? Cold storage, hot storage, like all these things you hear, and it was overwhelming to people. But I think it's our responsibility as kind of the venue operators, the exchange operators, the providers of price discovery, that we have to make it easy for people, so what they can focus on is managing their risk, accessing the underlying market or accessing the tokens or the digital asset on platforms. And I think that's really important. So I think with that, when we look forward though, where do you see some of your focus in kind of the next 6 months or so in terms of what you're looking to bring to the market?
Yeah, so we continue to focus on building the platform. We actually just introduced stop orders today, which is sort of new, very retail focused, but something that we continue to grow. A lot of our participants, especially on the market making side, obviously want to see continued growth in the marketplace from the customer side. So we're focused on that, focused on geographic distribution in new areas of the globe, and continuing to build out the custody portfolio in terms of feature set for that customer.
That's great. So in terms of Gemini being based in New York, what's the current global distribution of your customer base?
Yeah, so we operate mostly in the U.S. And Canada, but we do operate in a number of countries in Asia, a bunch of the islands, as well as we can onboard customers across Europe, but we're looking to really expand in those regions.
That's great, because it's certainly something that we saw was a bit fascinating and a bit pleasantly surprising is when we introduced the futures contract, the participation is about 50-50 US, non-US, both in terms of time of day as well as country of origin. So the fact that you can achieve that on a relatively new contract in a new market is fascinating. And I think it really speaks to the global demand. I think that's something that we maybe have a little bit of a different time or different challenges on at CME, because we can tap into that global distribution. We're a US regulated designated contract market, but we can have foreign participants trade on our market. That's not necessarily the same kind of set of rules I think that you're seeing in the spot market. But I'm just curious, when you're engaging with the regulation or the regulators and kind of trying to kind of establish this, is it kind of U.S. focused and opening it to international markets, or do you kind of want a focus on international, focus on U.S.? How do you kind of centralize the approach?
Yeah, so we focused really on bringing a sound market to all of our customers. So even within the U.S., we operate as a New York State trust company. As I mentioned, we're regulated by the state of New York, but we don't differentiate our rules for New York customers versus every other state in the U.S. or every other country in the globe. We think what's good for New Yorkers is probably also good regulation for the rest of our customer base. So the products that we list, obviously, we don't list any security tokens or utility tokens. We always make sure that we're in the good graces of our regulators, so we only list products that are really widely deemed to be commodities. So from our perspective, we think that running a healthy market should be the same market across the globe and not really bifurcated based on your jurisdiction.
Great. So I think with that, we have a few minutes. We want to see if there are questions from the audience or thoughts, reactions. It's always tough to be the first one of the day.
That's right.
But as a trust company, you can hold security.
We don't list security tokens for trading because we have to charge fees for trading, but for custody, we do custody a number of assets. So we have about 20 or so assets and growing in terms that we will store on behalf of our customers in cold storage custody.
CME has always operated on the institutional side, and this market is mostly on the retail side of things. What's your roadmap on to engage into the retail?
So Greg, so the question was, in case you didn't hear it, was kind of CME, I'll paraphrase, CME historically focused on institutional markets. There's obviously a very large retail component to crypto. How CME is addressing that. I think what's interesting to note is currently in our Bitcoin futures, about 10% of the flow is from the retail segment. At CME, though, we define retail as the sophisticated individual trader trading their own money. So this includes accessing through interactive brokers, TD, E-Trade, Schwab, et cetera. So that includes the professional class of day trader, right? So I think just to kind of level set on the definition. But when we look at retail is becoming a more and more important segment for CME. So when we look at 2018, they were up about 26% versus 2017. They traded about 700,000 contracts per day. And even in other asset classes, we just introduced the Micro E-mini futures contract, which is specifically designed for that active individual trader, the retail segment. And that was the most successful product launch in CME's nearly 200-year history. So I think our views are evolving. It certainly will pay dividends, so to speak, on additional crypto offerings. But I think what's really important to note, and kind of what we've been talking about, is it's not just appealing to one customer segment. If you want efficient, trusted, and believable, long-standing price discovery, you need multiple customer personas. You need the retail, you need the liquidity providers, you need the prop firms, you need the hedge funds, you need the asset managers, because they have different motivations for trading, and they certainly have different motivations for crypto. So it's when you get this confluence of personas to interact with each other that you actually will get true price discovery, because people fundamentally have different motivations and disagree on what the price should be, and the resultant cleared price is what becomes important. So retail is certainly important, but it's not necessarily the only ingredient you need to achieve that. I'm not sure if you're seeing kind of other things from your side.
I think the only thing that we dive into a little bit deeper is because we do have a lot of direct retail customer participation, but even within that mix, I don't think of our retail customer base as the retail customer base. There's the millennial retail customer base, there's the high net worth individual, there's the active trader, and then the mom and pop, which is probably the largest part of the pool of funds that are available, but sort of the less active crypto participant right now. And so building tools for them to easily access the market, it's different in terms of having to be a full reserve exchange. It's not something that really exists in traditional markets. So that's new for the customer. And as we talked about earlier, just the market structure is really different than going to your Schwab account and buying an ETF or buying some Microsoft. And so people are always seeking education, and I think retail is sort of the biggest component of growth in many ways, but also the groups that need the most education.
Sorry, can you speak up? Sorry, it's hard to hear.
Any plans on decentralized finance services like collateralized lending, like the BlockFis and others are providing now?
Yeah, it's something that we think a lot about, and it's certainly a growing business in this space, and so we give it a lot of careful thought. Our current regulatory framework as a trust company doesn't provide the flexibility for us to currently offer some of those services.
Great, and that, unfortunately, our time is up, but we'll be around for a little bit, so if you have additional questions, please come feel and find us. Jeanine, thank you for joining us this morning, and I look forward to continuing the conversation throughout the day, and thank you again for listening to us.